Listening to Will. Hi, I'm Jeffrey G. O'Brien, and I run the Spring Holloway series every year. But this event is not, strictly speaking, a part of the regular Spring Holloway reading series, although it is central to that series' intention and source. Tonight we'll hear from the 2021 Roberta C. Holloway Lecturer in the Practice of Poetry, Jen Hofer, in recognition of their significant creative work, and also to express gratitude for their attention to our undergraduate poets, especially in this exceedingly unusual and difficult semester. I can't think of a better person to have had not in residence, as Jen put it, to help and offer the radical care that Jen offers in all of her commitments. Among the other Holloway poets who precede Hofer are such notable figures as Michael Palmer, Yusuf Komunyakaa, Lisa Robertson, Ann Carson, and our own Robert Haas and Lynn Heginian, who will be introducing Jen tonight. A little bit about the lectureship's history. It came into existence in 1981 through a bequest given to the university as part of the estate of Roberta C. Holloway, who received her BA in English with honors from UC Berkeley almost 100 years ago in 1923, and her PhD in English here 23 years later in 1945. As required by the terms of the bequest, the committee supervising the lectureship, which is now shared among the poets in the department, was chaired by Josephine Miles for as long as she was an active faculty member here at Berkeley. Josephine Miles, who died in 1985 at the age of 74, was the first woman to be tenured in Berkeley's English department, and that could not have been easy either before or after. Miles was a nationally recognized and much honored poet whose work now has canonical status in the history of American poetry of the 20th century. And each year, we read an example of that work from another moment in Berkeley's history to honor Josephine Miles. So I will read a poem now. And I couldn't help but choose a poem called Love at a Distance. A little on the nose, but there it is. Love at a distance. Love at a distance can mean love of a dozen students sitting around for the last time before summer, to come no more, tired and sore, yet to be loved in their measureless aptitude. Love at a distance can be the good work done by a workman, so simplified he could not better it if he tried, so austere, thank or praise only by use, or can be the distance at which you measureless move, that is, far off, so that love can be drawn in filaments of thought in lines as thin as the lines latitudes rest upon, marking from plenty, from perfection, marking these measureless distances. Josephine Miles. We now have the really particular and intense honor of hearing Lynn Heginian introduce Jen Hofer. So Lynn, take it away, and thank you very much to all of you for being here.
Thanks, Jeffrey. We are indeed fortunate to have Jen Hofer with us tonight. They're one of the most influential poets of their generation, and also an indefatigable language justice activist, prolific translator, longtime community organizer, and as their students at Berkeley this semester no doubt realize, a gifted and devoted university and college teacher. They are a one-time Bay Area resident who moved their life eastward to earn two MFAs at the University of Iowa's Iowa Writers Workshop, the first in poetry and the second in translation, before moving southward to Mexico City and then slightly northward to Los Angeles, where they live now. Jen has long been a poet and poet translator, and as such, and by dint of undauntable energy and a thoroughgoing commitment to what it might mean in the best possible senses to be a poet, they have been virtually since their youth a major figure in North and Central American poetry scenes, whose centers they keep perpetually lively and whose borders they absolutely refuse to close. Jen Hofer is the author of several full-length books, As Far As, Certain Properties, Slide Rule, and One, 8 volumes of poetry that they have magnificently translated from the work of contemporary poets mostly women, writing in Spanish, and most from Central America, and multiple chapbooks, which seems to be their preferred format, especially as they include publications that they categorize as, quote, handmade artist editions, quilted poems, and tiny books made at the kitchen table. That's the name of the project. These latter include, and this is just a tiny fragment of the number of these handmade artist editions, quilted poems, and tiny books made at the kitchen table. Memoria Indomesticata, I Copy Your Copy, Uncovering, a quilted poem made from donated and foraged materials from Wendover, Utah, which is a site-specific installation on display at the Center for Land Use Interpretation in Wendover, Utah. Denotative skies, shroud, a piece of fabric sewn to a piece of paper by way of a map, created in collaboration with Jill Bagay for an inventory of Al-Mutanabi Street, to name, as I said, just a few. In addition, and indeed their life is one that is under perpetual expansion by addition, they are the co-founder of Antenna Los Angeles, an organization that has consulted, facilitated trainings, translated and/or interpreted with a range of organizations, including, and these again are just a fragment of the organizations that they have worked with, the Allowed series at Los Angeles Public Library, California Environmental Justice Alliance, California Rural Assistance, Cal State Northridge Chicana Studies Department, the City of Santa Monica, Frente Indígena de Organizaciones Binacionales, the Indigenous Front of Binational Organizations, Koreatown Immigrant Workers Alliance, LACMA, the Los Angeles Tenants Union, the Los Angeles Worker Center Network, the National Day Laborer Organizing Network, and the National Immigration Law Center. And again, in addition to their work with Antenna and its offshoot, Antenna Air, they work as an interpreter for the Los Angeles County Superior Court, working in the family court, juvenile court, criminal court, and civil court, and wherever else they are needed. So, what constitutes the life of the poet? There are probably as many answers to this as there are poets living a life. But for Jen Hofer, it is clear that what it means is an active, creative making of each day. For them, the social and the creative are a single politico-aesthetic practice, informed by the perpetual unfolding of experience and propelled by intelligence, generosity, energy, and love. Such a life involves friendships, collaborations, translations, teaching, justice activism, and life in an extended multiracial, multinational, multi-generational family. In honor of those family bonds and following Jeffrey's example, in honor of Josephine Miles, I want to read this short poem by Miles, mostly because I think you, Jen, will like it. It's called Family. When you swim in the surf off Seal Rocks and your family sits in the sand eating potato salad, and the undertow comes, which takes you out, away, down to loss of breath, loss of play, and the power of play, holler. Say, help, 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 hello, they will say. Come back here for some potato salad. It is then that a 17-year-old cub cruising in a helicopter from Antigua, a jackstraw expert speaking only Swedish and remote from this area as a camel, says, look down there, there is somebody drowning and it is you. You say, yes, yes, and he throws you a line. This is what is called the family of humankind. Jen Hofer has been throwing lines out to loved ones, comrades, and even to strangers for as long as I've known them, which is a pretty long time, and even before we met. Indeed, when we met, it was because they were throwing out a line to me, showing up at the door of a house I was renting in Iowa City the day after I'd arrived to teach for a semester at the Iowa Writers Workshop. They introduced themselves to me and offered their services as chauffeur, tour guide, comrade, chef, social secretary, and above all, confidant, though not all in those explicit terms. They made what would have been for me no more than an adequately interesting semester into a magnificent cultural and aesthetic adventure. The lines that Jen throws to their fellow humans are also lines of poetry, of course. Like the lifeline they threw me in Iowa, their poetic lines are meant to connect their recipient to the world around us. They are bonds forging affiliations and conduits opening communications. Their function is akin to that of translation and the practice of creating them. Jen Hofer's practice as a poet, which involves acts of obligation. The task is to ask language to discover what's meant, or more important, discover what's there that needs to be meant, to discover where sense is and what makes it. Jen Hofer's poetry is persistently testing and proving the truth of circumstances, contexts, and interpretations. And they are perpetually a writer of present time, time in its quickness, time as the moment immediately with us. Thank you, Jen Hofer, for serving as this year's Holloway poet and for all you have done and continue to do as you lead your exemplary life of the poet. And now, take over the evening.
Thank you. I want to start. First, I want to know if everyone can hear me. So make a face that tells me you can. Thank you. I want to start by thanking my students, some of whom are here. I mean, my current UC Berkeley students. You have taught me so much about what it is possible to do in close distanced space and the amount of intimacy that it is possible to create through shared love of language, openness, warmth, and kindness. And I commit to you that I will not forget the lessons you have taught me. And I also want to say that there are a couple of people here. I consider many people in this Zoom my teachers, but there are a couple of people here, including Lynn, who literally were my teachers in college classrooms. And I am still loving friends with them. And so I want to extend to you, my current students, that my hope that I will someday introduce you some 10, 20, 30, however many years from now, and be able to reflect back on a long life of friendship together. I also want to thank Lynn and Jeffrey and Cecil and Jessica and everyone else here who made it possible for this to happen. Okay. I'm going to read from two works in progress. The first is called Conditions, and the second is called Memoria Indomesticada, which was finished like 5 minutes ago, or maybe it's not finished. And then at the very end, I'm just laying out the evening for you. At the very end, I'm going to do an optional participatory activity, but I will give you the opportunity to liberate yourself from this Zoom before I make you do things with me. So I'm going to start by reading from Conditions. This series began as a collaboration with the amazing and wondrous poet, beloved friend, T.C. Tolbert, who lives in Tucson. And it was part of a series called Say Hello to Your Last Reading, and New Lights Press in Colorado Springs, a wonderful little chapbook press, small press, makes letterpress books. They would put out chapbooks for the folks who were in the series. And TC and I asked if instead of doing separate chapbooks, could we collaborate? And we made some collaborations. So the first two poems I'm going to read, not true. The first poem I'm going to read is a collaboration with T.C. Tolbert. I actually can't remember which words he wrote and which words I wrote, but I got really, really interested in the forms that we were writing in, and I'm now writing a book in those forms with his permission and blessing. So I will get started. Oh, and I meant to, I'll drop it in the chat in a second. This entire little chat book is a free PDF online. So I'll throw the link in the chat if anybody's interested. Aaron Kohik is the name of the wonderful person who made this chat book. Conditioning. Sorry. Oh, I also forgot a huge other thing. Okay, as I said, I'm doing brand new things here. Okay, so I want to experiment with, partly because this is a Zoom reading, and so things are possible that are differently possible when we're in person. So I'm going to experiment with sharing some images that came from a different project, but actually also map to this project in a way. And hopefully that will work well. 1 second. Okay. Okay. Conditioning. I'm sitting in a metal box, hurtling through the air, or I'm sitting in a wooden box bolted to a concrete shape set into the earth. The air is pale blue. Dear data, sometimes we mistake numbness for well-being. My neighbor, Esperanza, who is 6, tells me each day about the sightings she's had of my cats while I'm not home. At a panel discussion in Boulder at the Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics, which I and others call the Gertrude Stein School of Embodied Poetics, Renee Gladman said, shape was matter and time was energy. Experience was energy and language was shape. A dazzling metallic dress blinds us to the humanity of the mannequin body. Every time I sit down to write, I tell myself, read more, write less, or write more, worry less, or spend more time on the streets and less time at the desk. According to Judith Jack Halberstam in The Queer Art of Failure, failure is a way of refusing to acquiesce to dominant logics of power and discipline, a form of critique. When he lived in central Pennsylvania, C.S. Giscombe had what I remember to be an entirely carpeted, sunken living/listening room that was 2 steps down from the rest of the house. What can we actually unlearn? Sometimes it is not possible to get in the middle of a dangerous situation in order to diffuse it. The Villa del Rey house in Pasadena, designed by James Allen Walter in 1971, has a bed sunk into the floor of the main bedroom. Its cave is lined with books in the photograph in the architecture magazine. Can you hear the birds outside the window? Halberstam goes on to say that failure recognizes that alternatives are embedded already in the dominant and that power is never total or consistent. Exact numbers are difficult to ascertain, but the US government spends approximately 6 times more on the military than on education. Just for example, dear data, none of them are protected. Is it possible to fill what is porous? It was Laura Mullen who mentioned the mannequin in the context of talking about a capacity to notice what we do not see, to see what is not readily available to perception. Vision flips, or in her structured intervention, the hand she holds up to guard the light seems to be itself the source of the light. I noticed that my ex on her website had written me out of the years-long collaboration we did and thought about the violence of the first person singular and the violence of the first person plural. Khadija Queen said, language doesn't exist without a body. Regardless of architecture, sometimes it's hard to distinguish what is being said from what we are hearing. Dear Dada, Stacy Samazic, I know how to pronounce it, so feel free to ask me, said, "The lake is part of my lineage. I try to purge objects from my home, but I do not want to lose my memory, my anecdotes, my body. I think I do not want this." Conditions. What we said, we did not say. What we refused to hear, we could not prevent. What is to be expected? What drought, rot, what color, what rescue, what refuge might be hewn? What gauzy stone respite? What portable, what porous, what face we wear when insufficiencies gather, our bones, our caves? What spans, what pulls us in, what magnetizes, what death we thought we didn't know, what moving toward, what causes us to believe, what tempts us, what wonder without space, our small round bellies, small round bones, what empties us, what grieves and slows as it circulates within us atrophied, who is hungry and who is practiced at feeding, what will not move, moves, carrying necessity with it, what encroaches unsuccessfully, what bodies folded, collapsed, what aches emboldened, what wounds kept alive, how will color hear us? 90,000 children crossing the border in the last 3 years. What thirst, what listening, what refuge, what desert harbor, what desert keeps at bay, what keens, what dims, what signals we cannot read, what enforcement, what filament, what unmoved substrata, what bleeds unregulated despite the body, what will not bend, will not sleep, will not touch lightly with fingertip or tongue tip, what we carry in a pocket, radiating, thudding, what we lose in neglect, what we lose in death, what accidents build while we look the other way. Conditions. What we knew to be known, what is said or not said, what undeniable under unsoftly uncovered, what exposed body, what parched interlacings, what exploded interleavings, what cracked untouched, what fissures, what remains, what sun unravels wrapped in plastic, what we wish for without wishing to wish, or wishes us to become undone, rotting from the inside out. In the street, in the newspapers, in the gutter, in the margin, what plastic landscape, what window views of fractured elsewhere, looming in unlanguaged prison uniforms, what shield, what shattered, what matters under the sun if not the sun, what sun touches indifferently, what inevitability, what inheritance, future inheritance incarcerated at a rate of 1 in 6, what line to be towed, heads counted, dependent pressurized species, what surrender, the ground parched, exploded, dynamited open, what maw, what choice not to choose, what powerless submission to being unnamed, detonated, left for dead, what inaccurate count of persons vividly dead, what execution, what executive decision, rasping extinction, what intact scattered watershed, what dust rising beyond bodies blaring in the sun, sporing into vacancy, what shots, what mark, what sediment rising, span by span, where once there was water. Where once there was water, what body left behind? What scattered industrial bird bones flung across an accidental highway? What word disappears behind the word desaparecidas? What nunca más permits state-sanctioned commemoration of the end of a body that never ended? Conditions. What dateless body, what we exacted or nixed or hexed in the eternal present of not being able to, what not being able to not be considered garbage or trashed by the bag, what body precluded categorizations, what we categorically denied, what body unnamed in a plastic shroud, what body's name we refused to say, el nombre sin nombre callado, what body saying, I'm gonna light you up, what light, what you, 6,851,000 adult bodies cataloged, curtailed, what chance curtailed beyond even a moment to breathe, for light to expand in an observant sternum, what historical body in choppy movements, unhistory unmoved behind the glass, what body undertaken, what tableaus of indescribable death, what death unrequested, the question unformed, que muerte más allá de que pregunta, what tableaus of predictable death blanketing the countryside and its more than 5,000 correctional facilities, its correlative facilities, what blanket of death blanks out the body, a blank, a nothing, a death unnamed, a blank space or slate where the body was supposed to be written, but disappeared, interred, invisibilized. What words not spoken, what mouth shot shut, what not being able to express, what inkless sunspot glare uncontained, what map across what unmarked trajectory, steel tracked into stubborn entanglements, what water, what board, what textured uncommunicated breathes erosion, what body carcerally exploded in the absence of not knowing what to say. Conditioning. I'm biking through the world Will Alexander calls a combustible complex, or I'm biking through the shifting molecular interruptive design colonially and colloquially called Los Angeles. Or I'm sitting on a concrete slab organized to prevent public rest next to a person whose shoes are held together with toothbrushes, or I'm sitting in an elongated rectangle where cobwebs intercept the air into particles swelling. Is there a finite number of words? Dear data, sometimes we mistake cataloging for attention. I want to offer the person some of my lunch, but I'm not sure what kinds of eating are possible with only a couple of teeth, and it pains me to ask. What can we actually unlearn? I don't know why anybody needs poetry, and I know not everyone needs it, but I also know some people need poetry some or all of the time. The shift Will calls the electricity of language, or Seshu Foster's invitation. I am looking at your mouth to see what you will say. The cat who came in off the street some 13 years ago, maybe more, has malignant melanoma. The same cat who drew my 9-year-old favorite neighbor Esperanza to my house. She spells it Naber. Soretta Morgan wrote, I feel myself craving a fallow place. The distance between the tree and the roof is none in 2 places in the garden. One encroaching eucalyptus and one homonymic elm tree on Elm Street. Between the time I wrote the conditions poem that attended to the numbers of children separated from their parents at the US-Mexico border and the time of this writing, 2 days passed and the number nearly doubled, just for example. What is the distance between fallow and falling, between and in, between outside and out of time, between fertile and forcible and futile? The cat's name is Pancake. The cancer at the moment is dormant. There are 8 eucalyptus, though in one spot, 3 trunks share a common root system. I might have the numbers wrong. Pancake is a popular cat. Lisa Ann Auerbach once made him his own Facebook fan page, and he used to receive regular visits from 4-year-old Phoebe down the block, who knew where my house key was hidden, or her dad did. When Will performs Water on New Mars with Gasem Batamuntu and the New Nova compound, the moment where the higher, sharper voice enters scream singing into the oceanic soundscape soil is the moment that reminds me of Seshu's invocations of those who walked among us, cities of forgetting. Heart stopping every time, but then starting again with more heart, or as Soretta puts it, I want to feel possible in all the intimacies, radical, queer, sisterhood, state, room. In other words, the heart, its own many-roomed country. In actuality, there are 2 encroaching elm trees, both leaning on structures intended only to bear their own weight. The more things remain the same, the more things remain the same, was the reaction to contemporary right now police murders of unarmed African-American people from Albert Woodfox, who spent more than 15,695 days caged in solitary confinement for murdering a prison guard, a crime he did not commit. Dear Dada, I try to remember that to be accountable is not to be singularly accountable. The trees are called Chinese elms, though they are native to China, India, Taiwan, Japan, North Korea, and Vietnam. In Seshu's book, City of the Future, the oft unnoticed word "the" is a key player, almost an activist. In Los Angeles, mockingbirds accompany late nights in early summer. They can imitate cell phones, car alarms, and police sirens. What can we actually learn? When I wrote the first poem titled Conditions and Conditioning, I was nobody's mother. The Chinese elm is also called lacebark elm for the weft of its skin, which occasionally sloughs in a pattern that could be mistaken for continents. But there is no map, or if there is, it is only in imagination. Conditions. What we thought we did not wish to think, what we refused to see we couldn't help but allow to intrude, what unwanted membership jackhammering, what unexpected inability to see, what parallax view, most urgent, most abandoned, most metastasized, what sanction, what grief for bodies we will never hold. Our silence is horror, is complicity, is disbelief, is belief, is manufactured. What we will never hold at bay again, what again and again to endure, what bodies endure yet again, what gash in daylight, what perfect exit wound, unexamined castigation, shivering mirage in the distance, unsanctioned sunspots blistering, 7,000 bodies lifeless in the borderlands, unnamed remains, how many not located, dislocated, disintegrated, what metallic smell, ripe impunity sweeping across the manufactured landscape. What distance closing in, leering closer and closer, what senses demonstrating the countless disappeared, what body unenlivened, what word to replace the irreplaceable, what jail cell, what body broken, chained, what word to unsever, what will not fuse, what absence, what domestication, what anesthetic, what cage on wheels to be strapped into, cuff or to curtail, to muzzle, whose name obliterated, whose name broadcast, what metronomical regime ticking backwards, unhinged from any limits of what can be endured, or not to be able not to endure, because what's the option? Not to be able not to refuse, to negate the impossibly non-human erasure of the bodies unrecognized as bodies belonging. Conditions. What is alone and what is alongside? What building structure harbors emptiness beyond the violet bruising of languageless blow, totally alone or never alone? What impact, what whistling, what unheard air suspended? What suspends and what refuses to be held or removed? What yanked invisibly between lines of text never to be heard from again in any language? Blown out, blown apart, blowing through unmatched openness? What language beyond language, the shape of a body held in the air, retinally, until it dissolves into the normalized bright blue view we've been told to expect? What piercing noise cellophaning a skin of criminality over the body of a child who is 17, 14, 13, 12? What perfect body disintegrating in our hands? What expectation traced peripherally, backdropped, razor-wired, shimmered, blacktop, disappeared, wind blown? What wind blown out of it by what blow? What shape drawn on the asphalt to indicate the presence of a body whose absence was counted only as the dissipation of a person we were never invited to recognize in any way other than through words? Our world full of words that killed. What recognition beyond words, what not spoken, what unspeaking, what not seen, left alone in what presence calling you, what empty body channeling nothing, what color risen up into the sky, through what sky, what refusal to be named, airless refusal to become a vessel for this refusal to say you. Conditions. What counts as news? What unsuspecting headline or shot to the head or soundless ricochet deafening? What countless numbered, nameless, never numbed, never not embedded, fingered, indicated, gripped, taken in, ceaselessly enclosed, ceaselessly counted? What becomes, meanwhile, as we say nothing in the unblinking public eye, indicted without ever having said a word? What word could be said to indicate an indefatigable enfranchisement? What goes unsaid as a body dissipates indistinguishable in distant, distinct precision? confusion? What prison precisely clasps commerce? What commerce trades in irreducible digits, segmented irreparably by law or immunity? What not immune, not pristine, not separate, not fenced, but flickered, wanting, blasted apart until the term body, what term, what body won't stick, endlessly named over hundreds of years? What is not done? What is acquired? What is traded, marketed, shushed, unsayable? What is transacted? What is liquidly exchanged? What undoing undid? What body undone? What flight wingless, unbuoyed by airless, unlifted body slammed to the ground, grounded, electrified catalyst to nothingness? What body might try not to let go, but too difficult lets go? What body we deny or blur when we say our body? What silence swells in the space where speech curtailed? Our body can't be said, would hover. What body hovered high enough off the ground to hang at a pitch? What question unasked, hovering at a torturous angle, glimmering against a silence? What negation, what we negates? Conditioning, turning on the light. Conditioning. One need not be a chamber to be haunted. The brain has corridors. Helga Davis spoke those words, her voice an arrow slung direct to the volcanic core, right to the marrow. I'm sitting in a kitchen built 99 years ago while someone I love is unable to move due to induction and intubation, while someone I love is unable to move due to internment, while someone I love has gone up in flames. Who cannot be counted and who cannot refuse to be counted? Dear data, there is too much of you and not enough ground. Or the ground crumbles the more I try to cultivate. Researching the possibilities for saving the tree that leaned against my house, which then began to lean, a so-called Chinese elm, which was not possible unless I wanted to prioritize saving the tree over saving the house, purchased from the son of the man who built it by my ex and me before she was my ex, took a few months, accounting also for worry time, decision-making time, and time to question the decisions made. Fatty Judah writes, no shards where one is bound to no place in the first place, all shards. I know some of the reasons why I am here, and know it is likely there are other reasons I'm here that I do not yet and may never know. And I am also here to tell you that definitive action, like tree removal, for example, does not preclude continuing to question the decision to take said action. What can we actually unlearn? Removing the tree took a few hours. Perhaps cultivation is the problem. Stewardship, caretaking, and gracefully getting out of the way might invite refraction rather than erosion, fracturing features. Dear data, perhaps it's not ground we lack, but spark. Not spotlight faces the specific contour of your lips in my ear saying, yes, yes, yes. The phrase we inherited was from the son of the man who built it, even though we learned the house was built by a Union Pacific brakeman and his wife, who together slurried cement with pebbles and inadvertent air pockets into a foundation that still stands in earthquake country. I woke with a phrase in my mind from a dream dreamt in a small room in a small bed, meant for a different person under an open window, angled out toward a chemical sky meant for no one, breathing against everyone. The question was for Peggy Robles, who said, other days I am a rough-faced girl, full of want and will, mouth and fist. The elm tree got hacked away in pieces, its tough, papery bark sheared away once there was nothing left to protect. Perhaps it will become flame, flare, prayer. The question was, how do you shift from panic to transformation? Or as Fadi says, there isn't enough time or proximity for your essence or mine to vanish. Since the hawks had come to nest among the interlaced shadows of the leaves yearly with their young, I worried about having inhospitably removed their shaded perch, their former birth stillborn. Are we always other than ourselves? Or perhaps This is the query of a person irretrievably severed from their ancestry. I wake into worry, soothed by the ritual of coffee, deliberate and earthbound. Hawks do not sing. They spiral and shout and shear. I do not require fancy coffee, though I do enjoy it when it is available. From the air's perspective, the electric hum of the streetlights along the closed alleyway lined with sour tangerine trees is a kind of ground, or perhaps a companion air. Every so often, marbles surface in the garden, from the past perhaps, or the future. The transformation of a nail that once proposed the shape of a trolley. The Hudson River offered a different yet related question: how to mourn the future that will not happen. Everything I write is a letter to a person who cannot yet read and may never see these words, even after he learns to decipher them. I'm not getting to the story I intended to tell. I can't get away from the troubled field of power you reference, Fatty, when you say, let's say that translation par excellence is the stereoisomerization of an original compound. The components don't change. The molecular constituents remain the same, but their properties noticeably differ as their spatial arrangement and polarity of and to light are altered. What do I know of the air's perspective? In the electric hum of power imbalance and white supremacist circulatory flutter, you might have wanted to call it, as Fatty might, chirality, two compounds that are non-superposable mirror images of each other, but we couldn't find words for it, and in any case, the words were inadequate to the task. So instead of translation, there is transplant rejection or organ failure, the inability to breathe, when apparently breathing is a sympathetic condition of human life, flutter ruffling the cellular collisions we cannot not reject, no matter how intently we refuse to look away. Hence, we founder. And sometimes we are found if we listen with enough scintillation and unlock. The small human whose mother I am not demanded, spin me and spin me again, while two teenagers from San Diego played a cover of Ain't Nobody by Shaka Khan. I wrote some commitments, one involving dance parties in purple ink. Memories, Helga gestured, are gestures. A running leap on the count of 3. I might never hear anyone call me mama again, but I did hear it once, or more than once, and I know I heard it. Definitively, I am not getting to the story. I own blame, though I don't believe in ownership, or so I say, from within a mortgaged life. I set my commitment free in the post-industrial runoff. An imperial life, Fatty calls it. Trying not to try so hard, to say nothing, to feel what I'm feeling I feel when you say I feel what I feel, and trying not to love one thing or no thing, but things and ones. But things and nothings are one, and I've tried them all or tried to, and now I feel nothing so much as feeling what I said I wouldn't feel when I'm with you. Even my feelings feel and bore into me, boring not the same as feeling. Feel me try to not love love, to try not feeling to love a thing, and nothing I tried I couldn't do. Okay, so that is part of conditions. I'm gonna pause and have a little bit of liquid, and then I'm gonna briefly read from Memoria in Domestica. I forgot to say what I said at the beginning yesterday at my mixed blood talk, and thank you again, Cecil, for including me in that series. I forgot to say that I'm a fan of chat love. You should feel completely welcomed to write in the chat, though not obliged. I also want to say, one moment, I'm looking for the aforementioned link, which I thought I had right at the ready, and of course did not. However, it is right here. I also want to say that two beloved friends, one of whom is here, Vicky Bertis and Roman Lujan, made some translations into Spanish of a few of the conditions, which are up on the PEN America website if you want to see that work in Spanish. So this is a tiny book made at the kitchen table called Memoria Indomesticada. I am very inspired by the poet, artist, wonder of the world, Cecilia Vicuña. Cecilia Vicuña works in many modes and forms, one of which is she calls the precario, her little basuritas, little pieces of trash, her phrase, that she makes into small, ephemeral, transitory, temporary sculptures, and then allows to be documented and eroded. I was recently invited to participate in a show called Domestic Geographies to celebrate International Women's Day last month. And so I made some precarios, kind of thinking about the line in one of the poems that I read earlier about wanting to get rid of my objects, but actually not wanting to get rid of my objects, and the forever struggle of memory and objects. So you will see some of those precarios in my slides if I can access them. Okay. Oh my goodness, I'm gonna go let Pancake in, talk amongst yourselves. Never fails. Okay. Memoria indomesticada. Memory unbegins, where the water turned to dirt in a history that wasn't written. Sand is libation. Erosion is geography. Drought, waterfalls. Lluvia descalza en la voz del río. Voz de miel. Lluvia de abejas. Honeycomb river. Fossilized plastic no one can eat. Bone brittle. Bone dry. Bone bristled where the wake of a person cracks open. Architectures of sunlight drawn by dust to disappear visibly. Unsettled curvatures electricity refuses to trace. Missed placeless transit toward channelized pressures aching to overspill the surface area. Water turned to dirt. Sand. Libation. Abejas. River. Bone brittle. The wake of a person drawn by dust to disappear visibly. Bone brittle. Bone dry. The dent in living was formidable. Objects are annotations, instruments. The wind wept. Choreographic notes, pointers. Light can become metal. Nothing is reproducible. Literally nothing, exactly nothing, entirely nothing. Bones structure bodies. Translation is not reverse creation. The river flow gathers debris along its path based on the topography of obstacle and protrusion and snag. Fossilized inheritance. Memory is dirt, adjacencies. Objects hold anecdotes adjacently. Crevices. What slides off the surface of the dirt. La memoria de lo que nunca se pudo pronunciar. Decibels de lo indecible dicho trecho y hueco, la memoria de la desmemoria muriendo hacia la vida vidente con los ojos huecos. So be it, said Octavia. See to it. Que así sea. Que nos encarguemos de que así sea. Memoria de carbón, memoria de ceniza, memoria de fresno, memoria de aros, memoria de alas, memoria de piel, memoria de pétalo, memoria de casi silbato, susurro, arruga, arraiga, acurrucarse, carcomerse, cúrcuma, con todos sus poderes, todas sus ternuras. We have lost our memory, and the implication is there was something meant to be saved, says my student, who is my teacher. I am turning, spinning, or time is, past events, and what did not happen spooling out before us, threading. Ferns, dunes, dews, undoing. What is needed is listening across, toward. See to it, look to it, may it be so. It does not have to be done by me. I have to keep doing it, to be part of it. At 4 years old, Z says, I'm not a ghost, I'm a person. What makes me a person is that I'm made of parts. To be susceptible, to be a membrane, to be porous, to be bone and the hollow inside bone. The hollow is also the bone. To be inside memory. The hollow is also the memory. To transmit skeletally, to transmit muscularly, transformations channeled toward the oceanic, aerated, airy, molecularly networked. Recordar. Remember. To be long. To long to the river. La pala abra. A la orilla. Irrila. The sound a body makes, eroding against the world, eroding overtakes the thread of a voice hilando tenue en su canal tapada. Construimos la casa que nunca habitamos, el mapa del cuerpo de la casa que nunca trazamos, el registro que nunca documentamos, información desintegrada, información, de síntesis sagrada. Lluvia de sonidos, perforación al oído, al abandono. Naming is only in the now. Noun, unowned. Legado, delegado, regalo. Espacio de utilidad, nombre. Espacio de simbiosis. El ruido en sombra se nubla en el ADN que ha leído el futuro. La casa es un archivo, el río es un archivo, la arena es un archivo, el ADN es un archivo, la casa es arena, piedra, aire. El conejito corre al lado de los rieles, el archivo es una casa. El ferrocarril es un archivo, el ferrocarril abandonado es un archivo, el abandono es un archivo. La casa es ferrocarril, ADN y archivo. El ADN es un río. El río es cuerda, récord que fluye. El río se estanca. La memoria canaliza. La memoria canaliza la experiencia con cuerda. La memoria es un aire. El aire mueva lo que no pesa tanto. Lo que no pesa tanto fluye del archivo hacia el río o la desmemoria. El archivo es ADN. El ADN es una casa. El archivo es un abandono. El abandono es ADN. La memoria es ADN. La memoria es una casa. La memoria es un río. El río es una memoria canalizada. El canal es un archivo. Unsunder. Memory is a lung. Memory is a muscle. Memory breathes. The archive is a form of breath, a permeable structure to hold breath. Muscle memory. Muscle memory. The lung is a permeable structure to hold breath or to circulate breath. To circulate memory is to shatter the archive. The lung shudders as breath is archived. What lung shudders as breath is archived? Breath has no memory. Breathing sympathetically beyond memory. Which memories are the last to go? The river forms the channels that keep it, water and sand itself forming sand. We are our own archive. We are water. Water cannot be kept. Water cannot be kept. Breath held must be released. Memory, lessening, releases listening. The lesson DNA did not speak. Lungs hold and release air. Air holds and releases an archive. The river releases what the current snags, tells the story of a momentary archive unreleasing through touch. Rituales de serpiente, skin shed and watershed, railways and transitways and waterways, and thousands and thousands and thousands, refusal to quiet, disquieting roar of upward mobility, hushed root system, meshwork holding the dirt in, hushed. Negative space. What the air touches, touches us, touching peripheral retinal space. Inverse negative encountering boundary, molecular space. The container creates the circulation. Cellular space, cellular spaciousness. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jen, for naming and then undomesticating the conditions, and for all your work with the students this semester. And thank you all for being here and making this part of your day that Lynn mentioned that Jen inhabits so fully. And if some of you want to continue to make that day with Jen, I believe that they're going to describe a participatory activity now.
I am, but I'm going to wait a moment and just say that it's totally fine if you need to be freed from the zoomy world of Zoom. So I'm just going to give a quick pause and let folks exit who need to exit. And I'm also looking to see if JD Fluker is still here because, as many of you know, JD is my cherished friend and longtime collaborator, and I am about to do a Thanks for the chat, love everyone. I'm about to do a participatory experiment that will look very familiar to you, JD, because it is an Antena Aire experiment that I'm still interested in. It is called Responder, por favor. And I'm going to get out of this window. So for those who may not know, Antena Aire was, I love you too, Auntie and Unky, thank you for being here. Okay. So Antena Aire made work together